When we say be positive like a proton, we're not just making a clever scientific analogy. We are pointing to something fundamental about human existence and the way our inner life shapes the outer world. A proton, no matter what environment it finds itself in, never loses its positive charge. It is defined by it. And that is precisely what gives it identity, stability, and significance in the structure of matter itself. Now think about the human condition. We are constantly being pulled in different directions, surrounded by uncertainty, often exposed to negativity, cynicism, and doubt. Yet, just like the proton, we too have the capacity to carry a stable, unwavering form of positivity that defines who we are and influences the environment around us. Positivity, in this sense, is not just about smiling in the face of hardship or pretending that pain doesn't exist. That's shallow optimism, and people see through it. Real positivity is deeper, more resilient. It's a disciplined orientation toward life, a decision that no matter what happens, you will interpret events in a way that allows you to grow rather than collapse. That's why I call it the science of positivity. Because just as the proton holds its positive charge regardless of external conditions, we too can cultivate a mindset that holds steady even when we are placed under immense pressure. The great psychologist Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of concentration camps, wrote that even in the most desperate of circumstances, human beings retain the freedom to choose their attitude. That freedom, small but unbreakable, is the foundation of all human dignity. You cannot control every circumstance, but you can control how you orient yourself to the circumstance. That's what being positive like a proton truly means. It is a refusal to surrender your inner freedom to external chaos. And once you realize this, you begin to see that positivity is not naive. It is a form of strength. Let's think about how this plays out in everyday life. Imagine two people facing the exact same setback, say the loss of a job. One sees it only as catastrophe and allows despair to dictate his thoughts. He stops searching for opportunities, withdraws from relationships, and spirals downward. The other recognizes the pain but chooses to frame it differently. He says, "This might be an opening for me to explore something new. This is an invitation to grow." Same situation, radically different outcomes. What determined the difference? Not fate, not external events, but the inner orientation of the mind. The one who chose to remain positive, even in difficulty, aligned himself with growth rather than decline. That is the science of positivity in action. But here's something that often gets overlooked. Positivity is not automatic. Just like building a strong body requires training and resistance, cultivating a positive mindset requires conscious practice. It demands that you take responsibility for your own thoughts. This is where philosophy and psychology meet. The Stoics, thousands of years ago, said that we do not control events, only our judgment about them. Modern cognitive psychology says the same thing. Our thoughts shape our feelings, which in turn shape our actions. So, positivity is not just a vague feel-good idea. It is a disciplined practice rooted in both ancient wisdom and modern science. Now some of you might wonder, doesn't constant positivity make a person unrealistic? Isn't there value in acknowledging what's wrong in the world? Of course there is. But positivity does not mean ignoring reality. It means refusing to let the negative dominate your perception of it. The proton does not deny the existence of electrons around it. It simply remains true to its charge. Similarly, you don't deny difficulty, you acknowledge it, and then you orient yourself toward what can be built, what can be improved, what can be learned. That is a far more courageous response to life than sinking into complaint or bitterness. And here's another truth. Positivity radiates outward. When you carry a consistently positive orientation, people notice. They are drawn to you just as particles are drawn to the charge of a proton. You become a source of stability in an unstable environment. This isn't some mystical idea, it's human psychology. People gravitate toward hope, strength, and resilience. Your positivity gives them permission to believe in their own. In that way, being positive isn't just a private matter. It is a social responsibility. By choosing positivity, you influence not just yourself, but the people around you. Think about what that means on a larger scale. If individuals consistently choose to adopt this proton-like positivity, they don't just change their personal lives, they shape families, communities, even cultures. The ripple effect of one stable, positive human being is immeasurable. And it starts with a single decision. I will not surrender my mind to negativity. I will hold my charge. I will remain steady, even under pressure. So when you hear the phrase be positive like a proton, don't dismiss it as just a catchy metaphor. Hear it as a call to responsibility. It's an invitation to recognize that your orientation toward life is not something that drifts passively with circumstance. It is something you can define, something you can stabilize, something you can hold on to as firmly as the proton holds its charge. And here is the closing thought I want to leave you with. A proton never apologizes for being positive. It never doubts whether its charge matters. It simply carries it, and in doing so, it holds together the very structure of the universe. In the same way, your positivity might seem small in a world of chaos, but it is precisely that small act of holding steady that gives structure to your life and hope to the lives of others. So be positive like a proton, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Now, if positivity is the orientation that defines our identity, resilience is what protects it when life applies pressure. It's easy to talk about being positive when things are comfortable. It's when you're pressed, when the world feels as if it's collapsing in on you, that your character is tested. And here's the fascinating thing. The proton never loses its positive charge, even under extreme conditions. The environment doesn't dictate its essence, and this is precisely the model we need when we talk about resilience. Human beings often imagine that resilience means never breaking down, never struggling, never feeling the weight of pain. But that's not true resilience, that's denial. Real resilience is about carrying the weight and refusing to surrender your core identity while doing so. It means that even when you stumble, even when you feel crushed by the moment, there's something inside of you that says, I will not let this destroy me. I will rise again. That inner refusal is the strength that separates those who collapse from those who grow. One of the tragedies of modern culture is that we often confuse comfort with strength. We think that if life is smooth, we must be doing well, and if it's hard, something must be wrong. But this is a distortion. Strength is built precisely through exposure to difficulty. The body grows muscles through resistance. The mind develops wisdom through struggle. The soul deepens when it encounters suffering and learns not to collapse under it. Resilience, then, is not a luxury. It's the furnace in which our most profound capacities are formed. When we look at the psychological literature, resilience consistently emerges as one of the key predictors of long-term success and well-being. It's not intelligence alone, not talent alone, not even opportunity alone that shapes destiny. It's the ability to keep moving forward when every part of you wants to stop. And why? Because difficulty is inevitable. You cannot escape it. Life is filled with loss, uncertainty, rejection, betrayal, illness, and grief. No one is spared. The only question is whether you will crumble or whether you will hold your charge like the proton steadfast, unwavering, still positive despite the surrounding storm. But how do you actually build resilience? That's the real question. And the answer is deceptively simple. You expose yourself to difficulty willingly in manageable doses before life forces it upon you. That's why responsibility matters so much. When you take on responsibility, whether it's for your work, your family, your future, you are deliberately placing weight on your shoulders. You are training yourself to bear a load. And in doing so, you prepare your psyche for the larger difficulties that will inevitably come. Avoid responsibility, avoid challenge, and you remain fragile. Seek them out voluntarily, and you become strong enough to endure the involuntary hardships when they arrive. Think of the proton again. It doesn't select the environment it's placed in. It might be in a stable atom or a high-energy collision, but in every case, it holds its charge. Human resilience functions in the same way. You don't get to choose everything that happens to you, but you do get to decide how you will orient yourself toward it. And if you train yourself, if you deliberately step into challenge, you become the kind of person who doesn't crumble when chaos shows up uninvited. Now let's be honest, resilience isn't glamorous. It doesn't look heroic most of the time. It looks like showing up to work when you don't feel like it. It looks like being kind when you're exhausted. It looks like pushing through rejection, standing tall after failure, or quietly enduring pain without bitterness. These are not dramatic gestures, but they are the building blocks of a resilient life. Day by day, decision by decision, you strengthen your ability to remain steady. And over time, those small acts of resilience form an unshakable character. Philosophically, resilience is tied to meaning. If you don't know why you're enduring difficulty, it's much harder to bear. Nietzsche famously said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." This is not just poetry, it's truth. Resilience requires a reason. If you see your suffering as meaningless, you will give up. If you see it as part of your growth, part of your contribution, part of your story, you will endure. That's why cultivating resilience is inseparable from cultivating meaning. The proton's identity is fixed. It knows what it is. Likewise, you need to know what you are striving for, what you represent, what you refuse to surrender. That knowledge anchors you when life threatens to scatter you. So here's the point I want you to take away. Resilience is not about avoiding pressure. It's about being the kind of person who remains true to their essence when the pressure arrives. Life will test you, make no mistake about it. But if you hold your charge, if you remain positive like the proton, you will discover that the very weight that tried to crush you is the same weight that shaped you into someone unbreakable. And that's the paradox of resilience. The moments you think will destroy you are often the very moments that define you. So don't run from hardship. Don't pray for a life free of struggle. Pray instead for the strength to remain steady in the struggle, because that is where your true power emerges. Let me leave you with this. When the pressure comes, and it will ask yourself only one question: will I allow this to strip me of my essence, or will I hold my charge? If you choose the latter, then no matter the storm, you will remain unshaken. And that is what it means to be resilient, positive, like a proton, even in the darkest of times. If positivity is the essence that defines you, and resilience is the force that protects it under pressure, then the next question is, what effect does your orientation have on the world around you? Because here's the truth, you do not live in isolation. Every word you speak, every action you take, every attitude you embody radiates outward. Just as a proton attracts electrons by the very nature of its charge, you too exert an influence on others by the energy you carry. Whether you realize it or not, your presence changes the environment you occupy. This isn't some abstract mystical idea. It's basic psychology. Human beings are social creatures. We are constantly reading each other consciously and unconsciously. Studies show that emotions are contagious, literally contagious. If you walk into a room carrying bitterness, it spreads. If you walk in carrying calm, it spreads. If you walk in carrying hope, it spreads. Your state of mind does not remain locked within your skull. It ripples outward, shaping the attitudes and actions of the people around you. And if you think about it carefully, this places an enormous responsibility on each of us. We often underestimate how much influence we have. We assume that to change the world, we need power, money, or authority. But in truth, the most transformative form of influence comes from how we carry ourselves in the smallest of interactions. Imagine the teacher who refuses to let her students believe they are incapable. Imagine the parent who chooses patience instead of anger. Imagine the leader who radiates conviction rather than despair. In each of these cases, positivity doesn't just improve one life. It sets off a chain reaction that alters countless others. Now this can be both inspiring and sobering. Inspiring because it means that even if you don't have wealth or status or political power, you still have the ability to shape your environment. Sobering because it means you cannot escape the responsibility of influence. If your negativity spreads despair, you are accountable for that. If your positivity spreads courage, you are accountable for that too. The proton cannot help but influence. It attracts by its very nature, and so do you. The only choice you have is whether the energy you radiate builds people up or drags them down. Think for a moment about the people in your own life who have had the most impact on you. Chances are they were not flawless, they were not perfect, they were not gods. They were simply people who carried themselves in such a way that being around them made you better. Maybe it was a friend who encouraged you when you felt lost. Maybe it was a mentor who believed in your potential when you doubted yourself. Maybe it was a stranger who treated you with unexpected kindness on a hard day. None of these acts required wealth or brilliance. They required positivity, a willingness to stand as a stabilizing, uplifting presence in the lives of others. This is why I say that your positivity is not just personal, it is social. When you choose to remain positive like a proton, you're not just securing your own well-being. You're participating in the construction of an environment where others can flourish. And in a world drowning in cynicism, negativity, and constant outrage, people are desperate for such figures. They are desperate for someone who can show that it's possible to endure difficulty without bitterness, to hold strong convictions without cruelty, to face the unknown with courage rather than despair. You can be that person, but it requires a conscious decision. Of course, there's a temptation here to think, why should I be responsible for others? Isn't it enough to just manage my own life? And yes, you must take care of yourself first. But here's the paradox: by uplifting others, you strengthen yourself. When you see your positivity inspire someone else, it reinforces your own resilience. It gives your own struggle meaning. You realize that your decision to hold your charge, to remain steady, is not just about your personal survival, it's about contribution. It's about being part of a web of influence that can turn despair into hope and weakness into strength. There's a reason leadership in its truest form is less about issuing commands and more about embodying character. People follow not because they are ordered to, but because they are drawn to the strength of presence. A leader who radiates positivity inspires trust. A parent who radiates positivity creates security. A friend who radiates positivity instills courage. Influence is not forced, it's attracted. Just like electrons gravitate toward the proton, people gravitate toward those who carry themselves with steady, constructive energy. And this, I think, is one of the great responsibilities of being human. You cannot live in this world without influencing others. That's not optional. The only thing optional is whether your influence is life-giving or life-draining. Will people leave your presence diminished, or will they leave it strengthened? That is the question you must answer every day. So as you think about your own life, don't measure your worth only by what you achieve for yourself. Measure it also by the atmosphere you create for others. Because that atmosphere, whether it's one of bitterness or one of hope, will ripple outward far beyond anything you can calculate. And if enough people choose to radiate positivity, if enough people decide to be like protons, then communities change, cultures shift, and the future begins to look different. Let me leave you with this reflection. You are not neutral. Your presence matters. Your influence matters. And if you decide to be positive like a proton, then simply by existing, you will become a source of attraction for hope, courage, and growth. So carry your charge well, because others are depending on it more than you realize. If positivity defines your essence and resilience allows you to hold that essence under pressure, and if your influence radiates outward into the lives of others, then the next step is to ask, what happens when you are surrounded by negativity? Because let's be honest, life is not lived in a laboratory of perfect conditions. You're not always surrounded by encouragement or kindness or people who wish you well. More often than not, you find yourself in environments thick with criticism, envy, conflict, and pessimism. The real challenge is not whether you can be positive in a vacuum. The challenge is whether you can remain positive in the presence of negativity. Think again of the proton. Its identity is defined by the number of protons in the nucleus. That is what makes hydrogen, hydrogen, and oxygen, oxygen. It doesn't matter how many electrons surround it, or how unstable the environment becomes. The proton defines the identity of the element. And this is where the analogy carries weight for us. Your identity is defined not by what surrounds you, but by what you carry within you. Negativity will swirl, criticism will come, doubt will attempt to take root, but those are external forces. The real question is whether you allow them to alter your essence. This is where many people falter. They confuse environment with identity. They think if people treat me poorly, then I must be worthless. If I'm surrounded by negativity, then I must be negative too. But this is a distortion. Your value does not come from the noise of the outside night world. It comes from the integrity of your inner structure. Just as the proton determines the identity of the atom, your positivity, your refusal to surrender your orientation determines the identity of your life. Philosophically, this is the battle between external determinism and internal freedom. If you allow the world to dictate who you are, you will be tossed around endlessly, shaped by every insult, every failure, every moment of chaos. But if you decide that your identity is defined internally, that you hold your charge no matter what surrounds you, then suddenly the world loses much of its power over you. You stop being reactive and start being proactive. You stop being a mirror that simply reflects the negativity around you, and you start being a light that transforms it. If positivity defines your essence, resilience allows you to endure, and influence enables you to radiate outward, then the final step is legacy, because ultimately, life is not only about what you achieve for yourself, it is about what you leave behind for others. Just as protons form the building blocks of all matter, your positivity becomes the building block of a meaningful existence. And this is where the metaphor reaches its fullest depth. Protons don't exist for themselves. They exist as the foundation upon which everything else is built. In the same way, your positivity, your steady orientation toward life, lays the foundation for the lives you touch long after you're gone. Most people think of legacy in terms of wealth, fame, or recognition, but those things are fragile. They fade with time. What endures is not what you possessed, but what you represented. The memory people carry of you will not be a list of your accomplishments. It will be the atmosphere you created, the charge you carried, the way you made them feel in your presence. Did you radiate encouragement, or did you radiate despair? Did you leave them stronger, or did you leave them weaker? That is legacy in its truest form. And here's the sobering truth. You are creating your legacy every single day, whether you realize it or not. Every interaction, every conversation, every small decision builds into a story that others will remember. Just as an atom's identity is determined by its protons, your identity, and by extension, your legacy, is determined by the positivity you carry consistently, occasionally. If you only radiate positivity when it's convenient, when things are easy, your influence will be shallow. But if you hold it steadily, even in hardship, then your life becomes a kind of architecture that others can stand upon. This is why I say positivity is not just a private virtue, it is a public responsibility. Because what you carry today will echo in tomorrow. A child raised in the presence of steady encouragement will carry that strength into adulthood. A community shaped by individuals who choose hope over cynicism will carry that hope forward to the next generation. Just as protons form the stable core of the atom, your positivity forms the stable core of a culture. Culture, at its root, is nothing more than the accumulated legacy of countless individuals who chose to hold their charge. But let's not romanticize this. Building a legacy of positivity is hard work. It requires consistency. It requires sacrifice. It requires that you sometimes choose the harder road, the road of patience instead of anger, generosity instead of selfishness, courage instead of withdrawal. Each of those choices feels small in the moment, almost invisible. But over time, they accumulate into a structure far greater than yourself. And one day, perhaps without even realizing it, you will look back and see that your life became a kind of nucleus, a center of stability that gave shape to countless other lives. Think about the figures in history or in your personal life who stand out as beacons. They were not flawless. They had weaknesses, mistakes, even failures, but what set them apart was the consistency of their orientation. They carried their charge. They left behind not perfection, but presence, an enduring memory of strength, keenness, and courage that continues to inspire long after they are gone. That is what it means to build a legacy of positivity. And here is the profound irony. Most of us spend our lives chasing significance, worrying whether we matter, whether our existence leaves any imprint at all. But the truth is, your very orientation, your decision to hold your charge is already leaving an imprint. You may not see the full extent of it now. You may never see it in your lifetime. But positivity multiplies. It sets off chain reactions that extend far beyond your immediate vision. A kind word spoken today may ripple into generations. A courageous stance taken now may inspire someone you'll never meet. Legacy is not built in grand monuments. It is built in the unseen, quiet accumulation of positive influence. So the real question becomes, what kind of foundation are you laying? Are you contributing to a structure of hope, resilience, and growth? Or are you adding to the chaos of cynicism and despair? Every day you make that choice. Every day you decide whether your presence will serve as a building block for something greater, or whether it will dissolve into the noise of negativity that already surrounds us. And here's the hope in all of this. You don't need to be extraordinary to leave a meaningful legacy. You don't need fame or brilliance or vast resources. You need only to carry your charge consistently. Because just as the proton, small and unseen, holds together the very fabric of the universe, your small, unseen acts of positivity hold together the fabric of human life. Right, so as we draw this to a close, let me say this plainly. Your positivity is not just about you. It is about the lives you will touch, the futures you will shape, the story you will leave behind. You are building something with every word, every act, every moment. And if you choose to be positive like a proton, then what you are building is nothing less than a legacy of strength, of hope, and of meaning. And here's the final thought I want to leave you with. The proton never questions its role in the universe. It simply carries its charge, and in doing so, holds reality itself together. Do the same, carry your charge, and in doing so, you will leave behind a legacy that outlives you, one that gives others the strength to carry theirs.